You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marchegiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. We got a live podcast today with Aarn Farmer from mysugarfreejourney.com. Aarn has lost over 200 pounds in the last few years, and we're excited to kind of pick his brain a little bit and get some of the brain candy that's really helped him lose all this weight. So I'm excited to have that conversation. We're going to dig into the nitty gritty and really excited to welcome Aarn to the podcast. Aarn,
thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Justin. I'm excited about getting to share my story, and so I appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, thank you. I was on your podcast a few weeks back, and great podcast. Lots of great info, knowledge bombs that were dropped, and we're going to drop some today. So very excited.
Yep, absolutely.
So first off, I'd like to kind of just figure out what the habits are that got you to where you were in the first place. So you were what, up to 400 and something pounds? Is that correct?
Yeah, I was 400 pounds, and the big issue that I had was my blood pressure. So my blood pressure was 200 over 160. I was 400 pounds, and when I saw that blood pressure, and that was just kind of my normal blood pressure. It actually spiked even higher than that.
Wow.
On one occasion, it was 237 over 180, and the paramedics wouldn't treat me. They wouldn't do anything with me. They were pretty sure that I wasn't long for this world. So when I saw that and realized that blood pressure had killed both of my maternal grandparents, and then since all this has happened, my father passed away from a stroke due to high blood pressure. So I've got a really strong family history of blood pressure and obesity and all these things going on. So I really had to kind of come to grips with the fact that if I didn't make change, that that I just wasn't going to be long for this world. So I really had to figure out what to do and how to do it.
Totally. So you were very motivated to make these changes. Now, let me kind of back up. So walk me through the habits that you had in your life that caused you to put on all this weight. What was your diet like back then at your habits? Can you give me just I know on this show, we tend to do like, hey, what'd you eat today? It's kind of like a healthy thing to motivate people. Now we're kind of going back in time and saying, what were you eating to get that big? What was your daily routine like?
The biggest thing that really, really got me was I loved my soft drinks. And I had made the switch at some point over to diet soft drinks. But as we now know, that diet soft drinks don't really do a whole lot for you in terms of keeping you from gaining weight, as opposed to regular soft drinks. Yeah, they have less sugar in it, but for whatever reason, every time somebody does some science on it, you see the same weight gain or lack of weight loss when you switch to diet. So I had switched over to diet, but man, I was drinking, I don't know if you've ever seen a double big gulp, but it's like 60, it's pretty much a gallon or 2 liter of Coke. And I do at least one of those a day, if not two. Then have, snacks. And I was a typical sugar burner where I was eating food every 3 or 4 hours, and I couldn't go very long without a snack, and eating, crappy foods. My wife and I, we were raising 4 kids, so we were just trying to eat the cheapest food we could possibly eat, which was almost always carbohydrates. A lot of potatoes, a lot of rice, a lot of bread, but I didn't. I thought I was eating pretty healthy. I just didn't know what healthy food was. So that was pretty much it. It was just the cheapest food possible and soft drinks.
Got it. I'm actually going live here on Facebook as we're chatting. So we got Facebook here live as well. We're here with Aarn Farmer, and who's lost 200 pounds. Again, we just talked about Aaron's habits that caused him to gain that weight in the first place. The couple of big habits were the soft drinks, the sodas, the excessive carbohydrate, and then also the excessively cheap food. Again, we have cheap food, right? The government subsidizes $20 billion per year for corn, for soy, for grain, so it tends to be a lot of grain heavy, trans fat, kind of junky, nutrient poor foods. So that's kind of what your daily routine was: soda, soft drinks. You were a sugar burner, constantly having to eat sugar all day long, so you were just pumping insulin all day long. Huh?
Mm-hmm. And you have to do that if you want to get to 400 pounds. I didn't know that at the time, but you've got to keep your insulin levels just as high as they can possibly go to get to 400
Do you know what your
pounds.
levels were at? Do you know what your insulin or blood sugar or A1C was at?
Here's the crazy thing is that we got tested every year or so, that we would go in and get it tested. And my A1Cs, I don't know what they were, but every time I got them tested, they were never at a diabetic level, because my wife had type 2 diabetes. So hers were getting tested at the same time, and she was creeping up to a diabetic range. But my A1Cs were staying, they were going up, but they weren't to the point where a doctor ever told me, hey, you've got type 2 diabetes. I did have a doctor tell me that I had metabolic syndrome, which is a little bit different, but my A1Cs were not terrible.
So A1Cs weren't bad. Did you have any fasting insulin numbers? Any idea what those were like? No. Did you ever do a fasting glucose at all?
No, I wouldn't have fasted. I wouldn't have done that.
Got it. No. Totally. So then you gained this 400 pounds over what, a decade, 2 decades? What did that look like?
I'm going to say probably 2 decades, because I really noticed I was having a problem when I was about 40. But I'm one of those people that have been overweight my entire life. So, I was overweight in elementary school, in junior high, in high school, in college. And I wasn't 400 pounds, but I was always, one of the bigger kids in the class. So there's never been a time that I've been, thin.
Totally. And you went from at your heaviest to what? What was your heaviest? 400 and what?
Well, I tell people I was 400 pounds, but the truth of the matter is that my scale only went up to 400 pounds.
Wow.
So often it was just I was just a big old dude. In fact, let me show you something here. I keep this around as motivation.
And on your website, too, at mysugarfreejourney.com, you have a pretty good before and after up there, too, I saw.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, but that's it. Yeah, so that up at mysugarfreejourney.com, I've got a picture of me of what I look like. And I was probably right around 400 pounds at that time. And just, like I said, just a big old guy. I was just, I'd put on a lot of weight. And when you put on that much weight, you kind of, I don't know. You kind of fool yourself into thinking that it's not that bad, and so you kind of just justify it. But I'm showing your whoop. What happened there? Sometimes technology just escapes me.
Yeah, no problem. Wow.
But that's me, and that's my wife. So that's me at about 400 pounds. That's my wife, about 100 pounds heavier than she is now.
So you guys lost it together. So you guys lost over 300 pounds together.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely
amazing. That's good. So you were over 400 pounds. You're at 198 today. What was that aha moment for you? Was it a book that you saw? Was it a Jimmy Moore podcast? Was it a Dr. Atkins type of thing? What was the info? What was that flash that you
There were in the space 2 or 3 weeks, there were 3 or 4 things that happened. Boom, 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 enough to make me think, oh, well, maybe I should look at this. So the first thing that I ever read was a Yahoo Health article, written by a woman named Eve Schaub, who wrote a book, Year with No Sugar, and she was talking about how she went without sugar and all the things that happened because she didn't have sugar and anything. And she wasn't overweight; she just did it to see what would happen. But in the article, she mentioned that you might lose weight if you go without sugar. And her book was on sale for like $3. So I happened to have $3 or $4 on an Amazon gift card. I bought her book and started to read it. And in the book, she mentioned Dr. Lustig's video, Sugar, the Bitter Truth.
The Bitter Truth, yes.
And I was like, and boy, that video, Dr. Lustig pretty much just read my mail. I mean, he went through everything that I had ever dealt with, all the stuff that I was messing with in my health, and just said it's sugar, at the root of all this. So I decided, okay, I'm done with sugar. I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. And so that's actually when I started my sugar-free journey. That's where that name came from, is I just wasn't going to eat sugar, because I listened to that. I was like, and the only reason that website existed at the beginning was just so I could start information. I was learning, and I wanted to have one place I could put my thought, because it was a public blog, but I wasn't telling anybody about it at the beginning. It was for me. And then within probably 2 weeks of me watching that video, one of the podcasts I listened to was the Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn.
Oh yeah,
Pat Flynn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so he had a guy on named Vinny Tortorich, and Vinny Tortorich was talking about how he was having a lot of success having people grains. So I said, well, you know what? I've already not eating sugar. It's not that big a deal to cut out grains too. If it'll help, it'll help. And so not eating sugars and grains was really the big that started me down the path. And I probably lost the first 100 pounds or so just not eating sugars and grains.
I love that.
That's how it all started.
Yeah, people forget, like, grains convert to sugar. I know a lot of people in like the weight loss community or just the conventional health community, they think of like sugar as like, oh, it's refined sugar. It's got to say it on the back. It's got to say sugar. People forget that higher carbohydrate foods like higher fructose fruits or higher starches, especially grains, can convert to sugar. Also, the inflammatory effects of grains, right? Grains can also drive a lot of inflammation with the gluten sensitivity, which can jack up your cortisol too, right?
I didn't know anything about the inflammation part of it, but I realized very quickly how inflamed I was, but I didn't put the two together. So almost 3 or 4 months of just not eating grains, I got in the car and I went to pull on the seatbelt, and my wedding ring flew off of my finger and lost it. I mean, I still for hours.
That much weight around your extremities.
But it wasn't the weight. It was the inflammation.
Inflammation, of course.
Because I hadn't lost a whole lot of weight. It was the swelling in my hands had gone down to the point where that ring had shot off my finger. So I didn't realize the reason for that until I started learning about the inflammatory agents that grain is. And I realized that I was so inflamed that my hands had swollen. And now, I look at my hands and I can, the veins in my hand and my forearm and stuff, I could never see veins, anything. My hands were just too puffy. I couldn't see anything like that.
Totally. People forget, like, think about, you go back to the day, maybe you got a black eye or something. What happens, right? When that inflammatory compounds, you get a lot of swelling, histamine comes in to kind of vasodilate. So the immune system can kind of come in and fight it. Now imagine like little microscopic black eyes throughout your whole body. Histamine's higher, inflammation's higher. You get all these nuclear factor, kappa beta, interleukins, cytokines. All of these things are driving inflammation. And then inflammation, right, tends to cause cortisol to come about, because cortisol is the natural fire hose for the fire of inflammation. And cortisol jacks up your blood sugar even more. So you get this vicious cycle of having extra sugar in your diet to begin with, and then you're driving it higher with all of the stress hormones from all of the inflammation, right?
Yep. And it was it's a vicious cycle that you don't realize that you're in, because, it's just like the frog that's in the pot of boiling water that you heat it up degree by degree, and the pot just, the frog just stays in there till it boils to death. That's what happens when you put on weight, pound at a time, until, the average American puts on 1 to 3 pounds of weight a year. And you just don't notice it when it's that what would you call it? When it's that gradual, until one day you wake up and you're 100 pounds overweight or 200 pounds overweight, and you realize that you've really done damage to your body.
Oh, totally. And people forget too that people think, well, we have this issue with excess calories and excess nourishment when you're overweight or when you're obese. People don't understand that you're actually malnourished. You have so much sugar and so much carbohydrate coming in. Your body is in a storage mode, and it's not actually able to tap in to that fuel, because insulin, it's kind of like, when you're the conductor on the train tracks, you push it and the train goes one way or the other. When insulin's high like that, it's taking all of that sugar and it's putting it into the fat cell and storing it. And all of that fat that's in storage, all of those millions of calories of fat, can't be used, because once the storage track is on, the burning track can't be on. So then you got all of this fuel, all of this energy that can't be used at all. It's like being, another analogy would be, it's like being captive at sea, and all this water's around you, but you can't drink it because there's too much salt in it, and it will throw off your electrolytes.
I didn't realize how crazy it was to be as overweight as I was and always hungry. I didn't put that together. That I had all this extra weight, all this extra energy. By all rights, I should have never been hungry, but yet I couldn't put enough food in my mouth. And then as soon as I lowered my insulin, I don't get hungry very much at all anymore.
Exactly. It's amazing. So part of what you've done was you modulated your hormones. Like, it wasn't a calorie thing with you. You modulated your hormones. You dropped insulin. Insulin then affected leptin. So then you actually felt satiated, right? So you could actually take a breath and be like, hey, I feel good. Ghrelin got under check. So ghrelin is the stomach growling hormone. So then your growling's under check, your inflammation's better, and then your body actually started burning fat for fuel. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I want to talk about this whole the calorie idea, because if there's any one thing that I get on Twitter, I get flack about it, and when I talk to in our field, it really turns into an argument. And the idea is that, oh, you lost weight, you lost 200 pounds because you cut back calories, and what most people have to understand is that's just not true. What I did was I lowered insulin, and in the process of lowering insulin, I eventually got around to cutting out calories because I wasn't as hungry as much. But cutting out calories was not the cause of my weight loss. It was the effect. It was the thing that came secondary.
Bingo.
And so I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear about the cause and effect of my weight loss. I didn't pursue cutting calories. I pursued lowering my insulin levels and repairing my insulin resistance. And then as soon as I did that, the calories took care of themselves. I've never counted a single calorie. I care less how many calories I eat during the day. All I want to do is make sure that I do not eat foods that cause an insulin spike or any kind of glucose load on my system. And if I'll do that, the calories will take care of themselves.
100%. People forget this component. And in some of the studies, one of the studies by Christopher Gardner back in 2006 was called the A to Z study, where they looked at the Atkins versus the standard American diet versus the Ornish. One of the things that was interesting was it was ad libitum, so that at will you could eat as much as you want. And they did find that the people on the Atkins or the lower carbohydrate group did drop their calories. The difference is willpower was not a part of it. Right. We basically upregulated these feedback loops by dropping the insulin resistance. We improve leptin. Leptin's a signal for satiation in that part of the transverse lateral nucleus in the hypothalamus that tells your body you're satiated. That then drops down ghrelin. Ghrelin is the stomach growling hormone. So when your stomach's not growling and you're not having cravings, it's amazing. You start eating the right stuff. And then you have CCK, which gets increased with protein and fat. You have peptide YY, you have adiponectin. All of these foods, all of these neurochemicals are stimulated by you choosing the right foods, the healthy proteins and fats, and decreasing the inflammation. So now you got this feedback loop that gives you the power, it gives you the willpower back.
Yeah, and this is a lot of times if somebody is doing a study where they're comparing, a low carb versus a low fat diet, what's his name that wrote, or Gary Tubbs, he had this scientific, thing that he did. Well,
good calories, bad calories.
Yeah, so they did a study there where they were comparing low carb and low fat, but they held calories constant. So both groups had to eat the same number of calories.
Yes.
And then at the end, they were like, well, there's no discernible difference. And I was like, you took out the one thing that makes a high fat, low carb diet work, which is when you eat LCHF, you don't have to eat it. You don't have to eat as many carbohydrates. And so you remove the one thing, that appetite regulation that makes a low carb diet work. And once you let them go ad libitum, well, then you start seeing marked differences, not just you see marked differences in weight, but you see marked differences in calorie consumption, but not if you chase calorie consumption first. That's got to be a variable that can rise and fall at will. That's when you start seeing the difference.
Bingo. And then also your body's spitting out those ketones, right? So
yes.
Now you're a fat burner. So it's like you're on that train track. The conductor's kind of at a fork in the road. It can either be a sugar burner, which that means when you're burning sugar, that means you're not burning fat. And if you got like millions of calories of fat and you only can basically have access to a couple 100 grams of carbohydrate at one time, so then basically you're relying on a very micro percentage of your fuel in sugar, right? Because you only can have about a teaspoon of sugar in your blood at one time. So when you have 100 mg per DL,
very small amount.
That's 1 teaspoon. Your liver can store about 65 to 75 grams of carbohydrate. Your muscles store about 300. The rest goes as fat. So once you tap into that sugar, all that fat, all of that, in your case, 200 and something pounds of fat, couldn't even be touched. So you're basically flipping the switch on the track. So then you're going down that fat burning track versus the sugar burning track.
Yep. Yeah. And that's so key. And that's so crucial is that, it's the insulin, and it just takes an incredibly small amount of sugar to stop weight loss. And especially if you are morbidly obese because you have insulin resistance. So at the beginning, when I was 400 pounds, 350, 300, I could eat a chip and I was done losing weight for the week. It just made me dump so much insulin into my system. It took me a long time. It took me a lot of discipline in my diet, but also a lot of weight training, a lot of weight bearing exercises to really conquer my insulin resistance. So, when I talk to someone who's morbidly obese, I have to tell them their body does not react to carbs the way someone else's, diet or someone else's body does. You see people that are doing like a sweet potato cycling, diet. That's great if you have 20 pounds to lose. But if you got 200 pounds to lose and you eat that sweet potato, you're not going to lose weight that week. It's just not going to happen for you. You've got to conquer your insulin resistance first. And then if you want to cycle in a sweet potato every once in a while, it's not going to hurt anything, but you've got to get that insulin resistance dealt with in the beginning.
Totally. And I think it's hard because you get a lot of people online, like these higher carb people out there. I mean, let's just say maybe Chris Kresser or other people like Paul Giamone. They're just like, they're more leaner. They're kind of ectomorphs. They do well with, let's say a moderate. Kresser's probably a moderate carb guy, but there are guys like Dean Ornish or not Yudkin, the guy up in Northern California there. It'll come to me. But these guys are starch guys. They're a lot more. Pritikin's one of those as well. One more guy.
I just watched him on that What the Health podcast.
Yes, he was on What the Health. Exactly.
Yeah.
I know his clinic's up in Northern California there. It'll come to me in 1 second. But these guys are big on starch. Like starch is like an essential nutrient for these guys. But when you are insulin resistant, that means your cells are numb to insulin. So the amount of insulin that has to be produced to basically get that sugar into the cell is so much more. Now, I'll go back to that A to Z study. One thing that Christopher Gardner found in that study, I think that was profound, he found that the groups that had less than 7 units of insulin lost weight, whether they were low carb or low fat. Now, that was profound to me because the more insulin sensitive you were, it didn't necessarily matter what diet you did, right? As long as the calories dropped. Now, the crazy thing was the group that had the higher levels of insulin, they only lost the weight when they cut the carbohydrate. So that's the profound thing, is that when you get a lot of people that are giving advice about diet and they're more ectomorphic or more insulin sensitive, they may not have the empathy to understand what the insulin resistant folks are going through. So I totally get it. And I'm kind of on that fence. I do much better with the LCHF or low carb, high fat, kind of moderate protein shtick as well. I get that.
And because the big kind of thing to say in the health world is that diet is personal. Like, everything can be, personalized, and what works for this person might not work for that person. And I get what they're saying there, but what the part of the equation that they usually leave out is that the one variable, without fail, the one variable that you need to look at first and foremost is insulin resistance. And once you can determine the level of insulin resistance, you can figure out what diet will be good for them. If someone is insulin sensitive, they can go, like you said, they can do almost anything and lose weight. But if someone is really, really insulin resistant, you've got to cut the carbs. There's just no other way. That's what the doctor, he did the, he just passed away. Can't think of his name, but he did the insulin resistance studies where he did like a 5-hour glucose monitor test, and he put them in 4 or 5 different categories depending on how insulin resistant they were.
Yes.
So there is I forget his name, and it'll come to me in just a minute, but there is a mechanism to determine how insulin resistant someone is. And if you can do that test and determine that, that is that you can look at to determine which diet is good for you, or you can skip all that and just go low carb, high fat, and that'll work for almost everyone. I haven't really found anyone that doesn't work for.
Totally. And my wife is pregnant right now. We're having our first child in the next month, but we would do functional glucose tolerance testing with her, and we'd see how she'd respond after our meal. And, the goal would be to be below 120 within 2 hours, and ideally 100 within 2 hours, but below 120 within 2 hours on the blood sugar meter. And when she would add a little bit of starch in there, it would definitely linger up. Or if she added a little bit of starch, but she went for a 30-minute walk after dinner, the blood sugar dropped better then as well. So we noticed that if she added a little bit of starch, she needed a little bit of walk. And if she wasn't walking, she had to be really careful with the carbohydrates. So we could see that with the blood sugar monitoring, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And, just blood sugar is a fuel. If it's in your blood, you've got to use it or store it. So if you give that fuel something to do, go for a walk, lift something heavy, do some kind of physical activity, you're going to burn off that blood sugar and then get to the point where you are burning fat again.
Exactly. 100%. And the starch guy, I was thinking that was Dr. McDougall. McDougall. That's
exactly right.
Yeah. McDougall. Now, the big thing too is, all right, great. So you lose all this fat. Well, now you also got to put muscle on, right? Because when you're insulin resistant, it's also hard to put muscle on because your body is in such a stressed out state. It's putting on all this fat. It's going to also have a hard time putting on muscle. So a lot of people who gain fat tend to also be kind of sarcopenic unless they're doing a lot of lifting and such too. So getting the lifting going is important because lifting increases insulin sensitivity. It increases the amount of GLUT4 receptors in your body, and GLUT4 helps grab sugar or glucose and pull it in the muscle to be burned. So imagine your kid makes a huge mess on the table. Imagine you have a small little sponge this big or this huge big sponge that you wash your car with, right? The huge big sponge is going to sop up that mess like that. Think of that's what muscle is for your blood sugar. So I'm just curious, what's your take on that, and what did you do afterwards to help increase muscle mass, and what did you notice because of it?
Well, definitely the muscle mass went up. In fact, I was pretty happy. So I do exercises. I used to do like really heavy lifting, like doing strong lifts and everything. Yeah. And I got to the point where I was hurting myself a little bit, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I do. I ride my bike at least half an hour a day. I walk my dog. And so I walk her, for about a half an hour a day. It's about a mile walk. And then the weightlifting exercise I do is kettlebell, because I can just go grab my kettlebell and stand in my living room and pop that out in 20 or 30 minutes. And it works out my legs, it works out my back, works out my butt, works out my arms, my shoulders. And it's just one motion that does a bunch of different things. Which
love kettlebell. So great. One thing, it's awesome.
I don't want to spend a lot of time doing it, but it doesn't. So what I've noticed was that it was the weight bearing exercise more than anything else. It was the weight bearing exercise that allowed me to really break my insulin resistance. Not that it's perfect, but boy, it's a heck of a lot better now than it was at 400 pounds. And in fact, I remember the day I was probably about 230, 240 pounds or so. We went out to eat and I had some chips and salsa at a little Mexican restaurant, cheated a little bit. And so I expected to not be able to lose weight for, 5 or 6 days is usually what it was. And 2 days after I had those chips, I was back down to losing weight. And I really, really celebrated that day because that's when I realized that my insulin resistance had reduced a lot, and the muscle training I was doing was getting me to the point where I was able to eat. Not that I really wanted to eat carbs, but if I did eat carbs, they had some place to go and something to do in my body.
Now, I'm a big fan. If you're going to cheat a little bit, try doing a little bit of resistance training or burst training before. It's like wringing out that sponge, and now you can soak it up a little better. So I like that. Now, when you were kind of on that journey, did you see any other issues with your thyroid, or were there any other metabolic issues that you noticed that you had to address as well?
No, my wife had some thyroid issues. Yeah. So we've had to get that looked at and really kind of monitor closely. Elle Russ, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she wrote a book, The Solution, I believe is the name of it. And so I actually got her on my podcast and kind of grilled her about some stuff to do with thyroid. She was very, very helpful about some things that we need to do for Diane. And I tell you one thing that might be your listeners might not know, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is one of the things that you can do for thyroid health is, believe it or not, is to throw away your Morton salt and switch over to a really high quality seabed salt, something with some iodine in it, and something with some potassium chloride, and where it's not just sodium. You've actually got these other trace minerals.
Other minerals in there.
It was when we switched from Morton's over to we use real salt and Himalayan. Pink Himalayan salt, that we started seeing a little bit of movement in her thyroid, and then we did a couple tests and upped her or changed her thyroid medicine. I forget what the changes were, but that was the only thing that I saw that had to change. But in my own health, no, man, I was textbook, man. My triglycerides dropped like a rock. My HDL went up. My LDL went down. My blood pressure went down, 50 points. It was pretty much every good thing that you can think of, to happen to me happened to me. And I was pretty happy. Now I'm a guy. So, guys are a little bit, I think I have more experience with this, but I think guys usually have an easier time losing weight because we don't have as many hormonal things going on.
Estrogen kind of teams up with insulin, right? It's kind of a fat storage hormone as well, where guys have 10 times more testosterone. So that kind of drives more of the muscle growth, which then combats that. So women have this extra kind of variable with estrogen that definitely compacts and makes the insulin worse for sure.
Yeah. And so there's a lot more going on with women than men. So, I'm very sensitive to that too, because, I say hormonally women are, Swiss watches and men are bricks. There's just not as many moving parts in men that you have to deal with as compared to women.
Totally. That makes sense. I see that all the time. I primarily treat women, so I get that. Now, walk me through the three biggest changes. So you made this, these changes. You saw Dr. Ludwig's or Dr. Lustig's video on sugar. Dr. Ludwig is another doctor over at Harvard there. So they're kind of two of the same. But you mentioned that you saw these videos, Sugar the Bitter Truth, great video to watch. We'll put it in the show notes. But what were the changes outside of cutting some of the carbohydrate and glucose and grains out? What other three changes that you made that really made a difference? You mentioned the sea salt also helped too. What else?
Yeah. So I started paying attention to what I was eating because because I wasn't eating as much, I needed to make sure that what I was eating was the highest quality food that I could afford. So, like when I would eat bacon, I would try to get nitrate-free and sugar-free bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah, pasture-fed bacon. When I was eating beef, I was doing my best to get either grass-fed, or if I could afford it, grass-fed and grass-finished. If I could do that. I'm really lucky that my next door neighbor, like literally my next door neighbor, sells pasture. He fed eggs. That's what I'm trying to say. So he sells those for $5 a dozen.
Love it.
So I can get high ququality eggs pretty much anytime that I want. So I told you about the salt. So I really paid attention to the I really paid attention to the quality of food that I was putting into not just my body, but my wife's body too, because I want to make sure that we were getting the most bang for our buck. I started taking magnesium. I realized that I was magnesium deficient. So I really started taking a very high quality magnesium, which
makes sense.
I was really surprised at the effect the magnesium had on me, because it was when I started taking magnesium that I started seeing the biggest drops in my blood pressure, because magnesium just relaxes your muscles, relaxes your blood vessels. It just relaxes you, and so when I started taking that magnesium, that was a big factor in my blood pressure dropping. In fact, I think that was a big factor in why it was so high for so long, is because I was just eating such crappy food that I was probably totally deficient in magnesium. And so that I was glad that I found that. I just kind of stumbled on that. And then the other thing was just keeping my fats up. I focused on fats as the most important part of my diet. I made sure that fat was, I looked at the fat first before I started looking at the other parts of any particular meal that I was eating, and made sure that I was getting enough fat, and made sure that at least 60% of my diet was fat. So no carbs, 60% are
and a lot of good healthy,
and all of my carbs were complex. Right? But yeah, monounsaturated fat with olive oil, butter, lots of animal fat, and then green leafy vegetables and
right on. And any opinion on this coconut kind of stuff? Let's just say hysteria that's coming out of the American Heart Association. What do you think about that?
JD Sears had I think that's his name. He had a great video. I don't know if you saw, but it was so good, where he said, the American Dietetic Association is American, and guess what America doesn't grow? America doesn't really grow coconuts. So there's no financial incentive to incentivize people to eat coconuts if you're an American Dietetic Association, because coconuts are an imported food. But guess what America grows a ton of? They grow a ton of soybeans, wheat,
a lot of refined fats,
and there's a ton of incentive to incentivize people to eat canola oil and to eat these polyunsaturated fats and corn oil and cottonseed oil, and that's something that we as Americans, we grow in abundance. And I think it's really disingenuous, and there really needs to be a reckoning with this group, because they're giving out. I mean, you could forgive them in the beginning, because some of this, there was a lot of bad information out there, but we're 50 years down the road. I mean, Nina Teicholz's book has been out for a decade now almost. There's really no excuse to not have this science, and if that's your field, if that's what you're all about, is fat and the dangers of fat, you need to have kept up with the science. You need to have kept up with studies and realize that the science has moved on, and it's left your really terrible advice behind. So I'm pro coconut oil.
Oh, I am too. I mean, saturated fats tend to be very stable. I'm more concerned about a lot of the refined, refined polyunsaturated fats, especially the refined omega-6 ones that come from the vegetable oils that tend to be extracted in ways that have lots of heat and come in a very unnatural way that basically destroys the fat. And number two, if you look at coconut oil, right, if you look at saturated fat, when you take it, it may increase your cholesterol a tiny bit if it does, but it'll also increase your HDL and decrease your triglycerides. So you see an improvement in your ratio many times. Your HDL to triglyceride ratio tends to get better, less than 2 or closer to 1 to 1. And a lot of the older studies that look at the coconut oil and saturated fat, they don't really factor out the trans fat. So they kind of lump lump in trans fat with saturated fat. And once you control for those variables, you take out those confounding variables, you see a massive improvement. And actually, I think it was 2010 or 2011, I met Dr. Robert Lustig at American Heart Association event. It was a fundraiser. I went to it. But again, there's a lot of funding in and around the American Heart Association that, may create some conflicts of interest with a lot of processed food companies in the United States. So we got to be careful. We got to look at the confounding variables. I think the same people that are in the documentary What the Health, and they talk so poorly about animal products, they don't really differentiate between CAFO feedlot types of, let's say, animals and the good grass-fed beef or the pasture-fed chickens. They kind of lump it into all in one big bucket, and we know we kind of have to differentiate that, right?
Have you ever read The Vegetarian Myth?
Is that by Lierre Keith?
Lierre Keith, yeah.
Yes.
Fascinating book. I'm actually reading it right now.
I've listened to a lot of interviews where she's broken down a lot of the key concepts and points. But yeah, I'm familiar with Lierre's work.
So in the book, it's even more militant, I guess, is probably the best word. Her opinions, and she makes a very, very compelling point that veganism is killing the planet. That once you start, basically destroying huge swaths of the American heartland to plant corn and these big monocrops, that you are condemning that area to die. And that's she makes the point that the Middle East used to be a garden. There were cedars in Lebanon. There were it was the the cradle of civilization. And look at it now. And it's because they overfarmed, they over consumed the resources of the land, and now it's just a desert. There's nothing anywhere, and that's what we're in danger of doing to ourselves. And so going back to that What the Health documentary, that the guy that I forget which vegan person said it, but it said that sugar has no bearing on diabetes. That diabetes is caused by dietary fat. I'm like, what? Where are you getting this? There's no scientific basis for this at all.
What's the mechanism? We know the diagnosis of diabetes has to do with your blood sugar being over 126 milligrams per deciliter above, and 110 for pre-diabetes. So walk me through the mechanism. Walk me through your thinking on how fat, which has zero sugar in it, there's very little gluconeogenesis that happens. How does that increase your blood sugar? It doesn't.
It doesn't. And so these doctors are getting, and the old adage about science progressing one funeral at a time. It's a lot of these vegan doctors, unfortunately, that are going to have to, that are going to have to go away before the next generation of nutritionists are able to stand up and say, "Oh my gosh, we've had it wrong for 50 years. We've got to make some serious changes to what we're telling the American public."
Exactly, and to get adequate proteins, at least, you have to do a lot of food combining, which tends to, to get an adequate amount of protein, and being a vegetarian and not doing protein powders, you typically have to get at least 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrate a day. And if you're insulin resistant, that's probably going to be too much. Now, if you're really on the sensitive side and doing a lot of exercise, you may be able to get away with it. Again, the benefit that you get from animal proteins is you get really good healthy saturated fats, especially if it's grass-fed or fish and such, but then you also get some really good protein without all the sugar and carbohydrate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, your body is made of fats and proteins. There's no essential carbohydrate. There's no need for grains in your body. You're not made of grains. You're an animal. You're made of animal stuff. Yeah. So go eat animal stuff. And that was the thing that really amazed me, was how quickly it took me 3.5 years to lose 200 pounds, but how quickly all of the other markers of metabolic disease just disappeared as soon as I took those sugars and grains out. It was just everything evaporated, and I was a much healthier person 2 weeks after I started this diet. Even though you couldn't see the change in my body, I was a far healthier person, really, really, really early on, just by eating what I was supposed to eat.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think we hit all the key points here. Is there anything else you wanted to add here, Aaron?
No, I just wanted to invite people to come over to the blog if they want to come kind of read what I'm doing. MySugarFreeJourney.com. I have a podcast. You can find it there on the front page. I do also have a program where I mail out a ketogenic meal plan every week. If you'd like to sign up for that, it's at MySugarFreeJourney.com/28day, because there's a 28-day training program that goes along with it. And that gets you into a whole an exclusive Facebook group with a bunch of people. There's about 1,000 people in there that are using the ketogenic diet to lose weight and to restore their health. And we're doing some really amazing things in that room. So you guys can come check that out. MySugarFreeJourney.com/28day if you'd like to join us there.
I love it. That's great. And the only thing I want to add is there's one kind of controversial areas where you have, if you go low carbohydrate and high fat, there's some people I find that if they go too low carb, and they may be more on the insulin sensitive side, that the potential cortisol response that they get from being lower carb for too long for them may cause excess sugar from the cortisol response. So that's kind of one variable. It's not with everyone, but I do find that people that may have a negative consequence or a negative experience going low carbohydrate, they may actually find their blood sugar gets better when they gently up some of the carbohydrates. So kind of my default template is always start lower carb, higher fat, moderate protein, hit the wall. Some people never hit the wall and they just feel great and do great. And some actually increasing the carbohydrates 10 to 15 grams per week. They may find a sweet spot where some of the hair loss or cold hands or cold feet or the energy symptoms pick up. So default for me is, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, somebody that does that, do you ever find that that after say 6 months of bringing their carbs back up, that they can then lower the carbs again and see that once they're kind of easing into it a little bit, do you ever find that response goes away over time?
Yeah, what tends to happen is there tends to be like a cyclical thing that happens where if they cycle the carbohydrates up a little bit, they tend to be able to go back down and not quite have those symptoms again. So there may be kind of a cyclical fashion to it. And, evolutionarily, it makes sense because, there may be some famine. We don't eat as much. Maybe the carbohydrates restricted. Maybe it's just meat. Maybe it's the wintertime. And then, hey, spring comes. We got all these berries and things to harvest. Right. We eat a little bit, and then we go back to this kind of lower carbohydrate mode based on the season. So it makes sense from that perspective.
But even then, you're talking about complex carbohydrates. You're not saying eat a piece of bread or white bread or something. You're saying eat more like squash, zucchini, carrots, onions. Some of the more complex carbohydrates. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, my recommendations are always anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, right? Because the nutrient density is important, and the low toxin. So of course, the carbohydrates would be, maybe some lower fructose fruit, berries, lemon, lime, grapefruit, maybe an orange or apple, and then some of the safer starches, squash, sweet potato, plantains. But then do it incrementally. And even Atkins, in Atkins's diet approach, he has, induction, which is the very low carbohydrate ketosis phase. And then he has the OWL, the ongoing weight loss phase, where you hit the wall, you up 10 grams of carbs per week. And even Atkins has that kind of calibration thing built in too.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, any other comments here, Aaron? You dropped some good knowledge bombs. I appreciate you walking us through your experience. Anything else?
Yeah, the only other thing I would add, for those of you that, if you're listening to this and you are morbidly obese, I just want to encourage you that it's not hopeless for you. That if I can do it, anyone can do it. And there was no one more addicted to sugar than me. And it just took a couple things. I had to make sure that I understood why I was doing it, and I was keeping that why in front of me. And you know what? In 2 or 3 or 4 years, you're going to be 3 or 4 years older anyway. There's nothing you can do about the march of time. But wouldn't it be nice if in 4 years you were 100 pounds lighter than you are now, or 200 pounds lighter? And you could do it if you just start making the right choices now and make a commitment and stick with it.
Aaron, I really appreciate you coming on the show. People like you, talking to people that have actually gone through that 200-pound journey. It takes a while, but you did it. You got the information. You cut through all this exercise more, eat less crap. You got the real information. You did it. You're living proof. So I appreciate, the results right here in front of us. That's great inspiration. So if you are at that place where you're overweight, 100 pounds or even 50 pounds, we at least went over some things, some action items that we can do. And Aarn, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is a pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thanks.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.